Well, I said it earlier. Thank you for some of you to come back. It's very gracious of you. I hope I didn't scare you off yesterday. There's a lot of talk, a lot of technical stuff. Anyways, really appreciate it. I did this yesterday. I just wanted to kind of get an idea. Some of you I already know, but I wanted to see where you're at, what your interest is in coming to this workshop. So I know we have composers, right? Right here. Yes, awesome. Film. You're a composer? No, back behind there, the young gentleman. You like to compose music? Okay, awesome. Oh, well, I think this workshop is available online, so you can take that in. But to you, what's your name? Peter. Peter, there's a funny story. When I was about your age, I sort of got into music. Do you know what I did? On the way to school, I made up my own songs. And they went something like, in my head, I could hear it all, and then with my mouth, I was kind of humming it and playing the percussion and everything, the drums and everything, and it sounded awesome. Do that. Okay? All right. Directors. Any directors in the room? Sort of, semi? Okay. I'm sorry? Director. Awesome. Perfect. Any producers? There you go. Great. Listen, guys, appreciate you so much. As a composer, it is a task to educate producers and directors on what it takes to create music. So I really appreciate you sitting in, and hopeful it is valuable to you. All right? So, before we start, let me, I'm going to step back and forth a little bit. I know you're going to have problems, but I myself need to look at the screen here. I can't see it over here. So I'm going to read this back to you because this is something that I just recently stumbled upon. You know how this works. You read God's Word, and you read it 10 times, you read it 20 times, and it's God's Word. There's life in it, and it's great. But all of a sudden, the 21st time that you read that, something jumps out at you. Let me read this back to you because there's something in here that's really interesting. This comes out of 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 10 and 10 through I think this is wrong. This should be 11. But anyways, every believer has received grace gifts. We all know what that's about, right? We've read about the gifts, and we know what that is. Somebody has the gift of speaking in tongues, whatever, that gift is that's being mentioned. So use them to serve one another as faithful stewards of the many-colored tapestry of God's grace. If you understand a little bit about how tapestry is produced, your garments, there is a fundamental process of not only taking the yarn that's there, but it's the weaving, it's the interweaving. There's a process that's taking place that is making your garment, not only the color, but the shape of it. And this is what Peter is talking about here. It's a tapestry. Can you already tell where I'm going with this? As film composers, as film makers, that is a scripture verse that speaks directly to that. Let's go on. For example, if you have a speaking gift, speak as though God were speaking His words through you. There's more to come, but I'm going to stop there. I think we've all heard the saying that music is a language. Have you ever heard that? It's a language that communicates, and it communicates very well. Sometimes music has a way to reach deep inside the heart that words often can't, visuals often can't. Think about memorable themes, musical themes. I'm not going to hum one because I don't want to get you stuck with something. But the first two notes of that theme starting up can trigger an emotion, can trigger a memory. Because it is a language. It communicates. That's what this is. Music is a language. So this speaks directly to you musicians and composers. If you have a speaking gift, if you have the gift of musical language, use it. Enhance it. Become a master of that language. Isn't that awesome? I thought that was great. That just jumped out at me. All right, so let's have some fun. What I'm going to do is at the end, and please remind me because I forgot to do this yesterday, there was a little QR code that I should have shown with a link to some of the resources, and it was gone. We ran out of time, and so please remind me. If you're not seeing that at the end of this workshop, call me out on it, okay? But we're going to blast through what I'm going to show up on the screen in text form. You can download that. I made it available as a PDF because I want to get to the good stuff to show you some tips and tricks and what we do with film music. So, but before we get started, let me play a scary movie for you. Isn't that great? So what happened there? Somebody wrote this piece of music, and it fit perfectly to that little movie clip. I don't know the history of this thing, but I don't think anyone has spent that time to professionally record the music for this video clip, but it matched so perfectly. Did you see that last hit, the little kitten touching the apple? Isn't this fascinating? That's exactly what we do when we create music for film, for digital media in that sense. We line up events, we call that hit points, in the story, in the scenes, and the task of the composer is to highlight these elements, these nuances in what the visuals or what the dialogue is expressing. So as a film composer, your task is to come underneath that film and express, sometimes in a very emotional way, interpreting what is happening in that scene. I heard a few of you laugh. Why did you laugh? It's a disconnect, right? It's a comical thing, right? Here's this extremely serious action, thriller music, scary music almost, right? And there's a total opposite to that, and that made you laugh, right? So this is one of the techniques that we use in filmmaking, and music can do that very, very well. You can express something completely contrary to what's happening there, and all of a sudden you have a comedy element. So let that sink in, because this is one of the techniques that you can employ to very effectively make that film more interesting. If I would have played this back to you without the music, you would have kind of go, yeah, that's kind of cute, it's just a little kitten, it's just bouncing around and stuff. Yeah, that's what we watch on Facebook, right? It's just little reels and stuff. You add that music to it, and all of a sudden it's a comedy. Something that is funny. You take enjoyment from that. All right. So let's do one more. Where is my cursor? Over here. By the way, I did not score these. These were, I found them on the internet, so don't know who did them, but this is a perfect example of what I'm going to talk about next. going to comment much more on that other than to say, sort of goes a little bit in a lighthearted, comedic direction, right? So we don't know what's going to happen after that, but we're kind of setting the scene saying, hey, this is comedic, and so he's walking in there and kind of wondering, hey, what's going on, you know? Maybe there's a party in the next room or something, I don't know, somebody jumping behind a wall and whatever. So let's do this. Same footage. We didn't change anything. Now watch what happens. What changed? The entire purpose of going inside. That story is going somewhere completely differently. Isn't that amazing? Just by changing the music. We didn't change any dialogue. There was no dialogue there. We didn't change the scene itself. It's the same footage. Just the music changed. So, what are we doing here? We're interpreting something. We're creating story with that music. We always talk about, well, we just did the session on scripting, right? Writing story is extremely important, and it is important that you, if you're a writer in here, put into your story, into your script, what essentially that movie is about. By the time that that film gets made, the director's vision of what that should look like visually and musically may put a little take on that is different than what the original script might have spelled out. Because when you're reading scripts, have you ever read a script? Most of you have seen what a script looks like. Unless there is an element of music in there that is pivotal to the story, a script will almost never spell out what the music is supposed to do there. That comes later on. That's the interpretation between directors, producers, and the composers or other music professionals to figure out what that musical signature should look like. So let's look at that. And this is where we are going to do a whirlwind storming through. Here we go. All right. So don't worry, there's a PDF online, okay? I'm just going to blaze through this because I want to leave enough room for questions later on. So, is film music lying to us? I think in some way we just demonstrated that, right? Because music is one of the elements that we can use to do misdirecting. We heard that earlier, right? That's a technique, misdirect. Music can do that. And we can do this creatively. Music can be emotionally highly manipulative. It can lead us, and this is something very, very important for film composers to observe. As a film composer, you have the power to lead people emotionally in a direction that they may not be prepared to go. So always, always very carefully observe that. Music tells us how we should feel about that scene. Remember these two video clips? Footage is the same, but the feeling was different. It's deceptive in many ways, putting a different slant on the story, putting the listener into a passive position. So, if you think about what happens when you watch a movie, the most that probably is going to happen to you is that emotionally you're going to get involved in this film. Not so much from the perspective that you sit there in your seat in the theater and you jump up and, holler and shout because this thing no, you're observing, you're taking in, you're consuming something. So when we do that, we need to be also very conscious of that because we're putting the listener, the viewer, into a passive position. Word of caution. What other area does that happen? Excuse me? Drugs? That's correct. hypnosis, right? What I want to convey here is that as a composer, as someone who creates music, you have power. And you need to subject that power to the Lord, because you can do some damage there that I don't think the Lord really wants us to go there. So always be conscientious of that. There were some other things on there. So why then is music important in film? It represents the film's glue. If you ever watched a movie without any music in it, the dialogue itself and the scenes, the visuals themselves, will have to do a really, really tremendous job in keeping the people that are viewing this engaged. Bring in the music and all of a sudden things get glued together. Just think about this. Can you give me a popular music theme from a film? Jaws? That typically comes up. Dum 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 dum. Star Wars 1. That's right. Gladiator. That's right. So the first few notes that you hear that theme, it makes connections. It's the glue. It puts scenes together. When a theme of a film is being introduced at the very beginning of the film, maybe not overtly, but just with elements, could be a few notes, and later on you bring them together, all of a sudden you're making a connection. You're bringing the glue to that film, to the, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, you're bringing stuff in. So it's a thread that goes through the film. It explains subplot. I think we all understand what that is. It has the ability to reveal aspects of the film otherwise not obvious. You can highlight certain things. Could be a single note, could be a single percussion hit of something, right? What you're communicating at that point is you want the viewer to notice something. Absence of music is just as important. It highlights its presence. So film composers, to you, use as much silence, musical silence, as you do, let me say it differently. Observe the importance of silence just as much as the presence of the music. Okay? Because when the music then finally comes in, it is that much more powerful, because now you're making a statement. Hey, here's something that you need to pay attention to, because there's a new element in that film now. Let's talk about the creative process. What does that actually look like? Blasting through this, you guys, have you worked with a composer before? Okay. You know what this is, right? Spotting session. Film composers, do we need to explain that? Okay. If not, pull up the PDF and you'll see a few things there. Here's something vitally important. This is for you, directors and producers, and for you film composers to convey to the director. So for you film directors and producers, treat the composer as another actor. As a director, you're not just handing your baby over to the composer. You're still very much involved in that process. And it's kind of silly to even say that. Of course you are, because you're the director. But as a director, understand and know as much about music as possible so that you can help the composer understand what you're talking about. A composer has a completely different language in terms of even just talking about notes, keys. Do you know what a key is? A key signature, right? Okay, so you're already advanced, so I don't need to. But you understand the concept, right? That composers have totally different language, and they may try to communicate to you in a way that you don't fully understand. So come together a little bit. For you film composers, It is very, very important that you sit down with the director and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Director, I would like you to direct me just like what you would do with an actor. Vitally important, because what that does is it sets the stage for your collaboration that you're setting up for that film. Composers, as much as possible, talk in non-musical terms. We just talked about what this looks like from a director's perspective. From a composer's perspective, if you're going off into trying to explain something to them and you're using music theory, they may or may not understand that. So train your brain to scale this back a little bit. Speak in emotional terms more than in technical terms. Such as, what do we want the audience to feel like? Allow room to explore. Let's look at different options. Hey, I'm trying to remember what the year was. Are you aware of a TV series called Lost? Okay. Anyone know who scored that? Ah, yes. Michael Cicchino did the music for that, and he used a technique there that was extremely powerful. You may or may not remember some of these scenes. Story, it's a jumble. It's not. Don't go out and seek it out. Okay, it's just out there somewhere. But what they did was they showed scenes, especially in the later episodes, where there was no dialogue, there was no sound design. The only thing that was there was music. That was powerful. And to my knowledge, that was not the first time that this was done, but was the first time that it was done to this degree, where somebody said, hey, let's just let the music tell the story. Don't distract it with dialogue or sound design, because our brains can only focus on so many things. So you got the visuals. The visual by itself is telling a story. Now the music adds the emotional side to that. Powerful. Again, gonna skip through that. Cue sheet gets created, research story details as a composer, know the story, know the script, know the characters. Your music is a lot of times having to play the emotional side of that character from a subconscious perspective. Know that character, know what that person thinks, what that character thinks, and just see if you can interpret that musically. You need to get into the story mentally and musically. That needs to mean something to you. When you're sitting there in your writer's corner and you're watching the film for the first time without music, and you're thinking about what can I express musically to express this character's story? What is he struggling with, or what does that woman really latch onto? You know, different characters, and then you start expressing that emotionally, especially the ones that are emotionally deeper. You will find a lot of times that you're going to get to places where you yourself get emotional about it. That's when you know that the Holy Spirit is trying to communicate something through you. Latch onto that. Document it. Even if it later on is not getting used at that spot, it may be used later on. But document that. Okay? Going through, find the musical signature for the film. So this is very, very important. And I think what we're going to do here, let me see. Okay, I'm just going to throw this up on the screen because we're going to dig into something here that expresses what we're talking about here, musical signature, finding the voice, the musical voice for that film. It's very, very important. And here are a few examples. Composers, good, really great composers, add their own musical signature to that film. You mentioned Star Wars earlier, right? Who composed that? John Williams. Everybody knows John Williams, right? If you don't know John Williams, then come to me later on. John Williams, I had a question in one of the previous workshops, previous years of the Christian Worldview Film Festival. Why is John Williams such an effective film composer? What's the question? I'm sorry? Yes, he does. He does. Absolutely. Yes. Great themes. Very emotional in many ways. Epic. Yeah, epic. Films that he has done are just some of the most epic orchestral films. Always supports the narrative. Right. There's a story, if you watch Schindler's List, the music for that, there's a story, I think it's one of the interviews, where he was asked by Steven Spielberg to do the music for Schindler's List. And then John Williams sat down and just tried to write some sketches and some concepts in that. And he came to a point where he said, I can't do it. He literally told Steven Spielberg, I can't do it. And we all know that obviously he did go on to compose that music for that amazing film. But what he got to was to a point where he said, okay, with all the music knowledge that I have, with all the theory that I know, and I'm going to get to the answer why John Williams is such a prolific composer. All that experience that he's had didn't prepare him for that emotional aspect of having to write a piece of music that expresses such a pivotal topic. That, I don't think he said it, but I can imagine that really scared him. How do you capture that in that music? Okay, so I'm getting off track a little bit. Here's why this is my personal opinion. Somebody else might be thinking differently about that. Here's the reason why I think John Williams is such an incredible composer. Because he's a conductor of orchestral music. He knows about what we call devices. Devices are small snippets that composers throughout history have used to, those are small elements, melodic lines, orchestral arrangements, setups in sections. Here's what the strings need to do. Here's what the woodwinds need to do. This is what the brass does, and this is what the percussion needs to do. He has a wealth of classical music that he's intimately familiar with. He can immediately recall something. Oh, yeah, here are the chord progressions for this, and here's a modulation there. And so he has all of that. It's just like all he needs to do is walking into this big library in his brain and go, okay, yeah, I know what I want to do here. My opinion. All right. Other ones, great composers. John Williams, we already mentioned that. But what you will find with John Williams is brass. He uses a lot of brass in ways that you may not necessarily identify him with, right? But when you talk about Star Wars, for example, what's the main instrument group in there? Brass, right? And he's done that throughout. Whether he uses brass outright or he uses the concepts of a brass choir within the woodwind section. A woodwind section can sound like a brass ensemble if orchestrated well. Harry Gregson Williams, lyrical lines. Harry Gregson Williams, for you composers, you probably know who I'm talking about. Hans Zimmer. Okay. The Brahms. Heavy brass and synth elements. Hans Zimmer's music, I think he set that up himself. He's sort of like the orchestral rock musician. You know, that's an orchestra is a rock band to him, and that's how he treats it, and that's how he writes. My signature is somewhere in between Harry Gregson Williams and Hans Zimmer. I'm sorry? Yes, I'll be playing something back here in just a moment. So creative process. I gotta rush. It's on the screen. It's in the PDF. Grab it. Just download it. I want to have some fun. So creating sketches is important. Reviewing sketches with the director, composing cues based on cue sheets, full orchestrating and arranging the music. So these are the individual steps. That's the process, how we arrive at a finished piece of music that is essentially going to get mixed into the film and is hopefully going to get the film production company, the director, and the producer an award, and hopefully the film composer too. All right. Then we're producing and composing, producing the composed cues, recording the music, and mixing the music. We talked about that yesterday. So we did it a little bit reversed. We probably should have done this first, and then there's the delivery and final mix of the. Can you guys read this? Am I in your way? Okay. Either in stereo for most part here in this group, unless you're working on a bigger budget film. Stems are mostly not being requested. You're being requested. Yes. I probably shouldn't have said that. So budgets being what they are in our field, faith-based film, they're a little bit on the lower side. And you know, when you're subscribing to the concept that the worker's worth is higher, right, then you should really plan on paying the professionals what they should really be paid. And the moment that you're introducing stems, meaning that you're breaking up the music into different musical sections like strings, woodwinds, brass, percussion, whatever it is, things get more expensive. Because the mixing engineer has to sit down and mix those, adjust levels. That takes more time. Time is, there you go. All right, let's talk about a few production examples. And guys, pardon me if something gets messed up. Trying to keep things together and keep it in a way where hopefully this is all going to make sense. I have to move some things around. Can I? Here it is. Let me see if I can blow it up a little. Okay, so this is Pro Tools. This is from the movie Beyond the Mask. We were talking about Beyond the Mask is a, for those of you who are not familiar with that, it is a production from Aaron Burns. You heard about, if you were in the session earlier, he was talking about Pendragon, right, as his first, the Burns family's first production. Well, Beyond the Mask was his second film. And when we were sitting down and trying to figure out what that film should sound like, I think when you're watching reviews or read reviews of the film, there's some common elements that are always coming up. Like, well, that's like Zorro meets Pirates of the Caribbean, you know, that kind of a thing. Well, why is that? In fact, well, why do people make that kind of comparison for that film? If you're not familiar with the film, obviously, that's fine. Yes, similarities, right? Yes. Yep. Yes, yes. Okay, so for the people who are watching this later on, I keep forgetting this. They can't hear what you're responding with. So, yes, comparison to Zorro, kind of this hero type person, action, right? Sort of what you said. Well, the other one was Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Because it's sort of historical, you know, mercenary type of thing. And so what we decided was, why not play into that? It's a popular style, popular theme, so what do we do with the music? Well, why not go in that direction, right? So I read a comment once from somebody talking about the music of the film, and it wasn't meant in a complimentary way. Said something like, "Pirates of the Caribbean?" ? Well, yeah, that's what that was. So, finding that musical signature for that film, we decided early on that it needed to be extremely large. And when we developed the themes and worked on the sketches, the film in different acts plays in different continents. Act 1 is pretty much playing in England. Act 2, then we're moving into America. Plays all 1776 around that time frame, you know. Philadelphia comes up, and there's some CGI scenes that are really, really expansive and expensive. So what we're doing there with the visuals is setting the stage. This has to be a big movie. So what do we do with the music? We can't just bring a chamber orchestra in and let that play out, right? There's some sort of a disconnect. So what do we do in a film? We need to keep the audience in that suspension of disbelief, right? Because they need to feel somehow participating in the story, in whatever we're trying to create there. So what we do musically, we partner up with that and say, okay, let's make it large. So what we did is, and I'll play this back in a second. I'm sorry, I'm stringing you guys out. What we did is we decided, budgetary-wise, there is no way creating and composing, producing music on a large scale, large sound with a live orchestra. We couldn't do that. That was not possible. It is extremely expensive with a huge orchestra of the size that we needed here to produce a film score that you're about to hear. So then we decided to use virtual instruments. 95% of that film is all produced inside a computer. All of this is 100%. What you're going to hear is all 100% in the computer. And the goal was to go about as realistic as you could. That went out the window when we said, okay, we want this to be really, really large. So what we did is we employed a new, that was just released, a new virtual instrument library that was recorded in a way that produced the largest orchestra that you couldn't even realistically, in real life, record, because it included over 200 musicians. That's what you hear in there. And the speakers are probably not representing that well, but... So, two things that I want to highlight here is A, you hear a musical signature, and B, you hear the expansiveness, the volume, not necessarily loudness-wise, but dynamically, that we set out to do. This is what it sounded like. And apologize for that. Do we have an audio engineer there? Do you know which channel that is? Let me try something real quick. Okay, we're going to do this a little differently. Apologize. It worked earlier. Appreciate your patience. That's a proprietary sound library. I'm not sure that they released it into the public. You had to be a subscriber as a professional composer. So I couldn't probably tell you because I'm, yeah. No, but no, I'm under NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Yep, sadly. No, that's not what they were doing there with that. Apologize. I think I can find it. Okay, I'm just going to play this back in a different way, not inside Pro Tools, because Pro Tools seems to have an issue. Stop it there. Okay, so this is the scene where the main character moves to Philadelphia, and he essentially is going to foil a plot to blow up certain buildings, right? Because this is right around the Declaration of Independence, signing of that, and there's a subplot that happens there. So this is when the movie opens up with a wide-angle shot of back then Philadelphia, all CGI, comes in, and this is when that plays. So it had to sound American. Remember, we talked about musical signature? Could you hear that? The fives, exactly, right. So we used musical instruments that convey to the viewer that, hey, we're in America now. And not only in America, but we're in colonial America. Well, we all heard colonial music, right? Sure. But then we move on. We're bringing in additional themes. So this is the introduction of a new theme for the character being in America now. But it's very distinct because that theme then later on comes around again in different variations. Got it? Okay. All right. I wanted to show you something else real quick that hopefully will boot up quickly. We were talking about how do we go sketching certain things out, and let me okay, sorry. Okay, so this is a notation software. Oh boy, that's bright. Called Sibelius. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and then I'm going to play this back for you. This is for the music for a stage production called The Thorn. Has anyone been to the stage production or seen the movie? Saw the movie, right. Last week, Fathom Events, Monday, Tuesday, it came out. Fabulous production. Well, actually, I should ask you, but I scored it, yes. Well, together with a composer that I've mentored, I brought him into the production, and then there's another composer friend in Dallas who scored the more modern elements of that film. Anyways, so what this is, it's the stage production is Cirque du Soleil. You're familiar with that, right? Aerial acrobats and all kinds of different things. Cirque du Soleil sort of meets Passion Play, and it is fabulous what they've done. It came out of Colorado Springs, started in a youth ministry. The youth pastor wanted to convey to the youth group what Jesus Christ has done on the cross for them and wanted to do that through a play. And he did that, I think, a couple of decades now. Can't remember exactly. But out of that then came this stage production. It's large scale. They every year prior to Easter, they go on tour. They play in extremely large churches up until this year. And this year, for the very first time, they were invited to come into large secular performance centers. And so the physical tour is going right now in various different cities. If you have an opportunity to go watch it live, it is phenomenal, phenomenal. Great outreach production. They also decided to make a movie version of the stage production itself. That was released last week into Fathom Theaters, Monday, Tuesday. And what I'm going to talk about here very quickly in just a couple of minutes is the melodic development that needed to be done, because that stage production had, with the exception of the narrator scenes in between, didn't have any spoken words. The actors don't speak. They're just acting, right? So the music had to be very, very distinct. There were some other elements in there that we had to make sure were participating in that. And I'm talking now to the film composer, because we're talking about the same elements that we talked about earlier. The musical storyline needs to be there. There needs to be additional elements in there that help the viewing audience to understand what it is. Now you're moving this into a live stage production. There's a completely different dynamic than happens in a film. Not only do the stage actors need to have musical cues, rhythms that are taking place, so that they can time what they're doing. You'll see this later on in the clip. Aerial acrobats, they need to have their stuff timed. The guys who do the martial arts movements, right? They have to be. You see that at one point there's a musical event that happens, and the actors then go into action, right? So here is an example of how we're developing that musical line. So very early on, there was a melodic, and this is very, very simple, very slow, but you'll see it in the clip that I'm playing back later, what this actually does. It's very simple. So when this melody was developed, very simple, something that you can hum later on, memorable. And to that now, we have to figure out what we do with the rest of the music. We can't just have one single instrument play this thing, right? So we now need to go to the next step. We need to put something underneath that, and we do that with chords. That's what you see on those two staffs for another piano. Well, this is just a very simple concept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this back again with that melodic line on top of that. Film composers, if we would do a regular class on how to employ this technique, we would talk about picking notes from the chord underneath to go along with the melodic line. So if you're reading music, see if you can follow that here. Do you hear the transitionary notes? Chord stays the same, but we now have a transitionary node to another chord that we're going into. There's the transition. Right? So that's one of the themes that we developed. You will hear that. Then here's the next one. I'll scroll over a little bit. Now we're going to the next stage. This is a scene where heaven is revealed. This is the creation story. And now we need to get a little bit more lively, because there's something else that happens on the stage. You'll see that. That's the theme for that. One more. I'm going to play this back with the chords underneath. All right. Are you ready for the movie clip? Again, all of this is 100% produced inside a computer.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
You hear the melody?
Before time and space, God existed. With his Son, he ruled the heavens with all the beings they had created. And all the creatures of heaven worshipped God in his light and majesty.
There's the timing. See that? There's the main theme, the heaven's theme. But everything changed. One of the angels began to seek worship for himself rather than the God who created him. 1/3 of all the angels turned to Lucifer, and in his arrogance, Lucifer was cast out of heaven, sentenced to forever be the enemy of God. The creative hand of God moved once again across time and space. He would design new places of wonder and beauty. He shaped planets and stars, galaxies too numerous to count. Finally, God created his masterpiece. From the dust of the earth, he fashioned a being in his own image. Unlike any other living thing, this creation had the ability to think, feel, and choose. God created all humankind to have relationship with him. But the enemy tempted man to disobey their creator. A wall was built between the race of men and the God who loved them. To remove the wall and defeat the enemy, a sacrifice had to be made.
God would send his Son to reunite humankind with their Creator. The battle lines were drawn. Finally, all was ready for the arrival.
If you notice, there are rhythmic elements in the music, and the stage actors need that so that they can time their movements. There's one pivotal moment that you'll notice in a moment when the three angels line up, and there's a build-up of the music, and they know exactly how to time they have knives in their hands and how to twirl them and start with their flips and all the other movements that they're doing. Okay, here starts the build up. They know it's coming. That's the hero theme. So that's the Thorn. What you see in there is the sort of the culmination of what we do as film composers, telling a story in a musical sense. And in a stage play where there's no dialogue there, it's even more challenging because you have to express that. But what I want to highlight is when you're sitting down and you're creating your film score, be always conscientious, tell a story. Don't just rely on dialing up some omnisphere patch, putting a single finger on a key and let that play out, right? Work on melodic development. These days I hear that very little. So work on your craft and do all of that. I am sorry, guys. We're out of time. I told you I needed to rush through and I couldn't do it. But QR code, there you go. Yes. Thank you very much. So what I wanted to say is, because we're out of time, obviously I'm here to answer any questions that you have. I'll be around. I know we have something else going on. QR code, there it is. No, where is it? One more time. There it is. Grab it. So yeah, any questions that you have, just grab me and we'll chat, we'll talk. Really appreciate it. Thanks.